we've been talking about the DCU like each and every week on this show, and as we do, we usually end up talking a lot about what's happened in the past rather than what's to come in the future. And part of that has to do with the fact that there's not a lot of new news coming out right now with the SAG-AFTRA strike. We're not getting a lot of casting news. Every once in a while, we get some new negative information from James Gunn. But today, I wanted to sort of just talk about something that not just happened like in the past, but happened like a year ago. Is now I think it was this past week that we marked the 1 year anniversary of Henry Cavill returning as Superman, with his cameo in Black Adam. And then shortly after that, he made this Instagram post. He put out a video. There was this official image that he's back in the cape and, that he's going to be playing Superman. And we were getting reports from like all the trades saying that, hey, Pam Abby and Michael DeLuca, who were at the time, and still are the co-leads of Warner Brothers Studios, they were going to be looking to greenlight Man of Steel 2, and they were searching for a director. And this is before James Gunn was hired. James Gunn and Peter Safran were hired by David Zaslav, and DC Studios was set up. But in the meantime, they had sort of left the stewardship of the DC franchise to the Warner Brothers heads, the new heads at the time. And so they were like, hey, let's give it one more chance. Let's give Henry Cavill's Superman another shot at it. Mm-hmm. And a lot of people were happy to see him come back. It's a little disappointing that his cameo didn't really drive a lot of box office, at least seemingly didn't drive a lot of box office for Black Adam. Although one could say Black Adam still is the highest grossing DC movie that has to come out in recent times, minus the Batman, which isn't really a DCEU film anyway. It made more money than The Flash did. It made more money, like Black Adam, made more money than The Flash. It made more money than Shazam, Fury of the Gods. It certainly made more money than Blue Beetle. And I mean, hopefully Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom can go close to 500, if not past that, in terms of $500 million. The first one made $1 billion.
Yeah.
But Black Adam is the most successful DC movie outside of the Joker franchise and the Batman franchise. It's still, it seemed like, the Henry Cavill announcement wasn't enough to do any more for it. And then when James Gunn came in, we know that he decided we're going to go in a new direction. We're going to reboot this thing. And literally, I think it was like days, if maybe a couple of weeks, maybe even days after the announcement of Henry Cavill coming back, felt like whiplash. And I think even today it feels like whiplash to a lot of people, because I looked at some of the reactions of people commemorating this, almost like this somber moment of, oh man, what could have been. Yeah. So I wanted to ask you, do you remember this all happening a year ago? And then in hindsight,
I do.
What do you think about the idea of maybe even having a Man of Steel 2? Did we miss out on a potentially really good Superman movie with Henry Cavill?
Well, I do. I have talked about my love for Henry Cavill as Superman multiple times. I mean, when they announced that he wasn't going to be the new Superman, I was so sad. And, we've talked about this over the course of really the last year, because just shortly after his announcement, it was 2-3 months after his announcement is when they were like, just kidding, that's actually not happening. I do feel like there could have been a really incredible Man of Steel 2. I think there was so much to grow upon with that. I think Henry Cavill was a great cast as Superman. I think he did a wonderful job. I don't think Justice League was given a full go, especially with all of the conflict and the strife and the edits and the this and the that. It just didn't get what it needed to really thrive. And a big part of that is Warner Brothers' fault. And unfortunately, obviously, Zack Snyder and Henry Cavill and the rest of the Justice League really felt the whiplash from that. I really think that they paid for executives' poor decision making.
Yeah.
And it's so sad too, because it really does feel like what could have been, but now it's too far gone to reclaim,
Yeah. It was disappointing to me, because I personally think Man of Steel is the best Superman movie ever made. And I know that a lot of people was too dark, Superman kills Zod at the end, which, spoiler alert, if you haven't seen the movie in 10 years since it's been out, I don't think you need to worry about that at this point. But despite all of that, I thought his portrayal of Superman was the most grounded, the most realistic, especially in terms of just the struggle of this God man and how does he relate to other humans who have all these vulnerabilities that he does not have. Mm-hmm. And what does that mean on both a societal level as well as on a personal level? Whether you watch Man of Steel or Batman v Superman and even Justice League, Superman. The one thing that I really always appreciated about Zack Snyder's vision for the DCEU was that Superman was treated like this truly one of a kind special being that he isn't, and not in the world of comics, but also in the cinematic universe. Like there's no other character quite like him. And not only is he the original superhero, but he alone could change the calculus of like this a final battle in a movie. Like in Justice League, they were like losing the fight until Superman shows up, and then he by himself is beating up not Darkseid, was Steppenwolf, like and beating him to the ground and like tore off his horn with his laser vision and all that. But like I thought that was lost in the years since Zack Snyder like was forced out of the franchise, and then over multiple regimes at Warner Brothers, they continue to make like these weird decisions. Like, for example, just think about this. The last movie that Superman, like Henry Cavill, was in, now, of course, the 2021 version of Justice League on HBO Max with Zack Snyder's version of Justice League, or the Snyder Cut as we know it colloquially, you can kind of say, oh yeah, that was the last time we saw Superman on screen in 2021, so it doesn't feel quite as long as 2023, only a couple of years later. But really, Henry Cavill didn't come back for any new photography for that like version of the movie. They reused whatever they could, and then most of what was cut out of the theatrical version in 2017 is what they restored in the 2021 version. So really, truly, when you think about it, outside of these small, mostly headless cameos that Superman has done in like the Shazam movie or like in the last scene of the first season of Peacemaker, where you had these stunt actors in the costume, not even Henry Cavill, they had no dialogue. The last time we saw Henry Cavill Superman truly in a DC movie was in 2017. And it wasn't a very well received version. The last time we saw Ben Affleck's Batman in a truly starring role was in that 2017 Justice League movie. Since then, he's had these small bit parts. So your two biggest characters in the DC world have barely been showcased for 6 years. And when done so, then like these small bit parts. Same for Wonder Woman, Gal Gadot's Wonder Woman. She had a small part in The Flash. Like Ben Affleck was in the first like quarter maybe of The Flash.
Mhm.
It goes to show you like like I'm just like, you don't have to be getting paid millions of dollars to realize that that's not a good way to go about building your universe. There's a reason why Iron Man like kicked off the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and then in the Avengers Endgame, his "I am Iron Man" line and his sacrifice is what kind of closed the book on like the greatest franchise, like in terms of like financial success and probably just as the cultural phenomenon ever made. And since then, the MCU hasn't been the same. So you can even say the MCU has seen the exact same thing happen where you don't have Captain America, you don't have Iron Man there anymore.
Where do you go?
And similarly,
Yeah.
DC, I think, was, I mean, you know, the Batman, when that came out, it made over $700 million. These characters resonate with audiences. And I think, like, in hindsight, the Man of Steel has gotten more and more appreciation amongst the audiences. And the first movie underperformed, but it was only the first movie. I mean, if you look back at the box office numbers for all those DC movies up until COVID times, especially like up until Zack Snyder was really involved, even the worst movie made like $600 million. Like nowadays, like Blue Beetle didn't even cross 200 million, I don't believe.
So sad.
Like it's a big fall. Like, and so to me, in hindsight, I think if they had given Man of Steel 2 a shot, that movie could have performed at least as well as the first Man of Steel and potentially could have done better, because you look at his cameo in Black Adam, like he's got this like more colorful suit on. They even give him that iconic Superman curl on his forehead. It looked like we were getting a more like a brighter, more fully realized traditional version of a Superman who has already gone through this whole like Jesus Christ like arc of death and rebirth, and now he's like not quite, he's much more confident about himself, and he isn't so worried about like, oh, where do I belong in the world, like is Krypton my home planet or Earth my home planet. All of that stuff was already explored in Batman v Superman and Man of Steel, and it seemed like that we were going to get a version of this Henry Cavill Superman that a lot of people would have liked. A lot of the critiques that they made for Man of Steel would have been addressed. And I mean, it's unfortunate that, you know, they never move forward with it, but I don't know. I mean, maybe there's a world where James Gunn and, for example, think about this. If James Gunn never got fired by Disney, he might have been over at Marvel. So James Gunn would never have made the Suicide Squad. And so he wouldn't even be available to take on the role with DC Studios. And in that situation, maybe Man of Steel 2 does happen. I mean, that's the what if.
You're thinking about different cinematic universes here. There's just, it's we can
Um,
ask all the what ifs, but unfortunately,
yeah.
this is what it is, and there's no going back on it. And Henry Cavill doesn't seem to be doing too bad on his own. You know, it's very sad. It's been over a year since the announcement, but he is still in super high demand. He's got two new Guy Ritchie movies coming out. He has the Vaughn movie. What is the name of that?
Argyle, Matthew
Argyle.
Argyle.
We're
Yeah,
looking
made
ahead
by
to.
Apple. Yeah,
Yes. So
that
he,
looks fantastic. The trailer looks amazing for that one.
I mean, he's
Yeah.
he's doing the thing. And the newest Henry Cavill news, Highlander just got greenlit. It's going to be the Highlander reboot, which was also a
Yeah.
super famous movie that I've never seen, but I've
Yeah.
heard about. Now
I
I
think it
feel like,
had like multiple sequels and a TV show that
yeah,
was
a
based
lot
off
of
of the original.
spin-offs. But this is going to be the first full reboot of the movie, and I'm excited to see
It's
Henry Cavill in it. Yeah.
it's been a long time, and I was looking up like so. Chad Stahelski signed up to basically direct it, and he's directed, of course, all four of the John Wick
Yep.
movies. So Lionsgate is the one that's making this. They just brought this movie. They packaged it up, and now they brought it to American film market to find investment. And it's a market that's been struck by less product in a manner of speaking because of the SAG-AFTRA strike. So a big potentially big franchise like Highlander coming to the market, I think is a boon for the American film market, but also as a move for Henry Cavill. This is a project that Henry Cavill has been attached to for some time, and he's been fan cast in that role for even longer than the last couple of years, where he's been officially sort of like circling the drain around it. And not only is he going to be leading this franchise moving forward, but for fans of Highlander, it brings an ordeal that I think began as far back as 2011 or 2014 when they first started to like throw the idea around of rebooting this thing, and has gone through kind of like the Flash did for DC. It went through multiple different sets of directors at one time or another, different producers. The producer of the original franchise passed away a couple of years ago, but the script they're working off of now, the current draft of the script, is based on the draft that was put together when that the latest iteration was put together by the producer who passed away. And so it looks like they're moving forward. I mean, usually movies evolve a lot in pre-production. We'll see where it goes. So the fact they've gotten it this far, I'm excited to see what I think is and it's like a cult franchise almost. It's not, you don't remember Highlander as quite on the same level as Star Wars certainly, but it's a franchise that has a following. And Henry Cavill brings his own following across, whether it's his fans of his Superman portrayal or The Witcher. I'm excited to see where he goes with this. And I'm quite frankly gonna lose my mind if he ever shows up again as Superman in like even an Elseworlds or some kind of multiversal cameo in any of the new DCU movies with
I
James
won't
Gunn in
rule that
charge.
one out. I feel like they might try.
Because
I do think people are upset,
it's
and I am scared
yeah,
the new Superman movie is not going to do that well.
the thing is, even if the new Superman movie like makes $600 million on a budget of like 250 or 300 million, like the first, like the Man of Steel did, like it did those kind of numbers. I think unlike what Warner Brothers is that time, which they panicked and they were like, oh no, this under like even though they made a profit on all of those movies in the early part of the DCEU, they panicked because they weren't getting like good critic reviews and some fans were pointing out these issues. I think, or I hope that this time around, James Gunn, Peter Safran, and David Zaslav, this new regime with DC Studios, they stick with it. Like you gotta. Here's the thing: the first Captain America movie, the second Iron Man movie, the first Thor movie, they aren't remembered as the greatest movies in the history of the MCU. But they continued on that path, and then the first Avengers movie comes out, and it changes the game. They make $1.5 billion, and from there, the rest is history. So you have to stick with it. And I think if they repeat the same mistakes as they did in the post Man of Steel, Batman v Superman era of DC, then I think we'll end up in the same situation we did a few years ago, and they may have to reboot again. So I
Like,
hope that David Cornsweet has a
I think
better success with the character.
overall, I mean, what you just described is the issue with most things in the business, in
Yeah.
any business world, right? If you make reactive choices versus planning it out, sticking it through, and really believing in something, they've just been reacting this whole time, whereas the MCU was so ahead of it, planned everything, and followed everything through.
Well, and to be fair, even the early years of the MCU, especially before the first Avengers movie came out, and even like after that, it wasn't like the MCU was today. The MCU is super planned out. Like they have like writers room, and they basically treat it like a big television show would, where you have a writers room and you have a bunch of creatives who have all these like stories and mapped out and character arcs. Back then they were sort of like making a movie and they're like, let's see how well this does. Let's do the
Yeah.
next one. Oh, we put out 3 or 4 characters. Now let's bring them together, maybe introduce 1 or 2 more. And then here we go. Here's the Avengers movie. It was literally that was the lot that I think there's a new MCU official timeline book out. And some of this is discussed in it where Kevin Feige's quoted and a bunch of other people who are involved behind the scenes on the business level. The early MCU took a lot of chances. And not every movie was a breakaway, runaway success, but they stuck with it. And they took a few risks. They tried to do less of what was not working, more of what was working. And yeah, I mean, look, if the first Avengers movie failed, maybe we would be looking at a very different world today. Maybe we wouldn't have had an Avengers Endgame, but it didn't. And so they were rewarded for their faith. It's not always going to happen. You know, not every entrepreneur succeeds with every business that they start, but when it does, when it does strike gold, sometimes it's worth the risk that you took in the initial run. So I hope that with the DCU with David Cornsweet coming in as the new Superman, they let the filmmakers like James Gunn take a few risks, and then if it doesn't necessarily work, they don't immediately turn to a different idea and
Yeah.
abandon what they have put together already. And I think today the DCU is starting with a lot more planning and foresight from day zero than the MCU even did. So I think they've already got a few things right that they weren't even close to getting right when Man of Steel came out. So I think that will probably help them.
Yeah.
How well the Superman Legacy does, we'll find out. I, for one, will always sort of have a certain level of regret in my mind of not having seen more of Henry Cavill Superman because I loved his portrayal and Man of Steel so much. And I'm sure there's a lot of people out there, guys, if you're watching, let us know. Do you still miss the hypothetical scenario where Man of Steel 2 would have been greenlit? We've got a director and Henry Cavill was back in the role. Is that something that you still reminisce about? Is that something you still would like to see? Or are you just looking forward to Superman Legacy and what James Gunn does with the rebooted DCU? Let us know in the comments. And of course, like and subscribe for more content like this. With DCU Daily, we are back here each and every day, giving you the latest updates from the world of DC.